your face, the shape of your face, the lines, the general look of your face can give you information about your body, about your organs, about what could be going on inside. And that's why I'm thankful to have my guest, Dr. Todd Frisch, join us today from Why the Face, WTF. And we were joking today as we were talking, everyone, about how I consider him one of my mentors, and he's too young to be my mentor. That's what we were talking about. It's really, really great. But when you're talking about a person who is an expert in facial diagnosis, facial reading, if we want to call that the correct terminology, but in Chinese medicine, your face can tell you everything. And Doc, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thrilled to be here. Yeah, I have such a passion for this. So, it's never difficult to talk about something you're passionate about. So happy to be here.
Oh, man. I'm going to write down notes, everybody, and I think you guys should too. And the reason that I am so thankful that Doc came on here with us is because I like to just go into a story that I met Dr. Todd many years ago at a acupuncture seminar that he was teaching at. And the first thing that I remember was the smile on your face, Doc. You came up, shook my hand, and you said that I did have a bucket face. You said I had a bucket head. And I was like, yes, what does that mean? And you literally told me pretty much who I was right there. And I was thankful. And when I say he told me how I was, he told me my personality just from meeting me at that one point. And from that moment on, I have your book, and you and your daughter wrote this book, and it's an amazing book. And I've referred to other patients and people have read the book. And for everybody out there, it is a book that explains so much about not only personality, but physiology within your body and how it's expressed on your face. So I know we're going to jump into it, Doc. We want to have a really cool convo, but could you tell us about yourself? Because I love everybody out there to know about you.
Yeah. So I'm retired, didn't take. Yeah, I left active practice in 2017. I miss what I missed there. I don't miss the government telling me how to do my business. So that part I don't miss. I didn't miss. I got out before COVID came. I would have lost my license because I wouldn't have played by their rules. But look, I've always had a passion for trying to help sick people get well. I didn't know that at the time, that this was going to be where I ended up, but I'm glad it's glad that it ended up where I am. And I was very interested in health early on and realized that I didn't like a lot of what I was told. I was once told I had normal everyday headaches, and my neighbor, who happened to be a chiropractor, says, "You realize headaches aren't normal?" And I go, I think you're right there. So I worked with him, and he treated me. And you got to understand, I was earning about $1.90 an hour working at a Clark gas station at the time, and so I dropped out of college. I dropped out of college like 3 times. I couldn't find my way in life. I dropped out with straight A's, so it wasn't that I flunked out. I dropped out. But he treated me with this weird chiropractic technique called BEST, and yeah. And he charged me $20, which making, $1.90 an hour, he wiped out a lot of my pay for the week. So I went home, and I was watching Perry Mason, and cause I watched Perry Mason at 3:30 every day, cause I loved Perry Mason and how he thought. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, I started to urinate, and I couldn't quit urinating. I was asthmatic, and I had headaches every day. And so I got up and urinated. I stood there and I kept urinating. And then I watched a little more, and then I had to urinate again. I lost 11 pounds in 24 hours.
What?
Yeah. After my first treatment. And I was never going to go see this guy again. I was never going to talk to this guy again because he charged me $10. and so the next night I played in a City League basketball game. I'm an adequate basketball player. But I scored 54 points in a game. I couldn't miss. I missed 3 shots, and that's because people tackled me. The next night, I went bowling. I'm not a good bowler at all, but I bowled a 235 game in a 600 plus series. And the next night, I had to go see Dr. Mike again. I go, whatever the hell you did, do that again. So after my dropping out of school 3 times, college 3 times, he got in my face one night and said, where are you going to be in 4 years. And I go, yeah, I have no idea. Probably drop out of college a few more times. He said, well, you might want to consider going chiropractic. And I didn't know much about chiropractic. I only knew the chiropractic he showed me. But man, it just opened this door. So went to Palmer, graduated, ended up moving to St. Louis, practiced with Dr. Ted Morter, a wonderful mentor, did the best technique. Got to know, got very interested in acupuncture, studied with Dr. Richard Yenny and a plethora of other people. And they graduated me, threw me into the lion's den there, and all of a sudden they started keeping score in life. And I started working with patients. And most of us as physicians were enamored with our successes. I was not. I was like, how come that patient didn't get well? And I was motivated by that. So life went on. I had a very successful practice, but I just had a moment where I just realized I have to have a paradigm shift. And it started with a guy named Jack. He came to me, and Jack was a wonderful man. I met him at the church I went to. And when Jack came into the room was different. He just, there was a spiritual peace about him that was palpable. Here's my dog, Lambo. Say hello, Lambo.
Hey, Lambo. How, buddy? Aw, sweet boy.
He is a good boy. 94-pound good boy. He came, I worked with him, he had some health issues. We were able to help him very successfully. But he would always bring me his blood test from his medical doctor. And because I looked at, there's normal range and then there's optimal ranges. So I would look at his blood work and say, it's normal medically, but it's a little high end normal. And I would make some recommendations, and he would respond quite nicely. So this was a Tuesday. He came in around 11 o'clock, and I worked half day, and he says, hey, Dr. Todd, I got my blood work from Dr. Mike. I'm going to set up an appointment. I said, hey, Jack, I got a couple more patients. Let me take a look at it, and then we'll go out for lunch. And he goes, it'd be great. So I'm looking at his blood work, and he's sitting across from me. I said, hey, Jack, what did Dr. Mike have to say? And he said, Dr. Mike said, I wish my blood was as good as yours. And I said, Jack, not only is it good medically, this is the best your blood test has ever been. Your textbook midline normal, even in my narrowed ranges of correctness. That was a Tuesday. On Thursday, he was jogging in Queenie Park in West County, St. Louis. He was dead before he hit the ground. And I had just told him this was the healthiest he's ever been. And it was that moment in life where you just go, what the heck good am I? And, early on, you're in the same world as me, working with patients and doing things different than what is considered normal. And, I've done this for 45 years. And when I started, because I did different things, I got the quack label. I didn't like being called a quack, but I was helping people, so I'm okay with it. And then they, we quacks wouldn't go away. So then they said, well, you're alternative medicine. And I go, I don't like that word either, because it means you choose this or you can choose this. And then we still wouldn't go away. And they go, well, you kind of compliment us. And now you're complementary medicine. I don't like that word anymore. And I like alternative or quack. And then we all went to CAM conferences, which is complementary and alternative. And then we progressed from that point to what they referred to as integrative medicine. We all practice integrative medicine because now medicine was integrating us into their system. And then they go, there's value here. So we're gonna call this functional medicine, which is what we practice today. And I have equal disdain for functional, integrative, CAM, complementary, alternative, and quack. I don't like any of the terms. Because what it should be called is restorative medicine. We should restore people back to the place they never should have left in the first place. Now, back to Jack. I realized right then and there, I got to change. And so we're trained as physicians to ask what's wrong. And I respect that. And it's good. And if you got cancer, diabetes, you want a what's wrong doctor in your camp. But I realized the shift I had to make was I had to ask what's not right. And it sounds like semantics, but it's huge. You literally have to be 2/3 sick before Western medicine sees anything wrong. And that's not a slam against medicine. It just is what is.
Yep.
So once you cross that two-thirds line, this is where medicine shines. Now, they suck prior to that. So I decided I'm going to look at what's not right. Well, all of a sudden, there ain't nothing there. There just isn't anything out there. I studied Ayurvedic medicine. I studied astrology. That was an interesting walk. But I really got into traditional Chinese medicine simply because there are a lot of books. And in my world, you and I are bucketheads, so books are our favorite thing.
Yeah.
We have book orgies, and we just love the process of learning. So I read a book back in the early 80s called Secrets of the Face. Very poorly written book. Authors no longer alive. Needed an editor desperately, but there were these 9 face shapes, and I stole them. Einstein once said that when you take from one person, it's plagiarism. When you take from many, it's research. So I have over 80 books on facial diagnosis that I've researched. Anyway, my research got me into facial diagnosis, and I started with these 9 face shapes. You and I are both what are called bucket faces. Of the 9, it's my personal favorite because that's what I am. So we love to put things in our bucket. We have a thirst for knowledge that's unquenchable. We're intellectually persistent. We're thought leaders. We're strategists. We're list makers. We never finish our list because God will take us home if we do. So we add to our list so we never finish it. We're always busy in our head. We need nothing. We need a chair and a brain, and we're happy. So when I got into that phase, and then I got deeper. I got certified in acupuncture and all those other kind of things. I ended up teaching in that world. It just reached a point where my wife, my dear, sweet, lovely, beautiful wife, Linda, she says, you have to teach this thing about facial diagnosis. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. And she goes, yeah, you can. I go, no, I can't. And she says, well, you're going to teach it. You're going to teach it on this weekend. And I go, geez, I thought it was intuitive, and I just didn't think I could teach. So I ended up teaching it. It was a huge hit. Then they wanted not just a 2-hour class. They wanted a weekend seminar, which I did that. And that wasn't good enough. Then they wanted a book. And so Linda said, you have to write a book. And my daughter, Abby, who's just a beautiful, talented writer, she just took what was in my ADD-infused bucket head and it ended up coming up with Why the Face, Practical Guide to Understanding Health and Personality Through Facial Diagnosis. But it all started with that moment with Jack that I realized I got to make a shift. I got to look at what's not right.
Oh, man, Doc. And when that time came, when you said Jack, when he passed away, you started learning about the face. You started seeing all the nuances of the face. And I love that story because especially the Einstein quote, that was amazing. And you're going through and you've got all these books and it shows you things about the face. When you remember Jack, were there signs and signals on the face that you thought if you would have seen those things, maybe it would have gave you an indicator of like why he had passed away?
Yeah, actually, I had a lot of those thoughts. He had a lot of cardiovascular indicators on his face, and he had a history of obesity. When I met him, he was very trim, but he pushed his body. He had some issues with alcohol abuse, and so he had a lot of things that could create some problems. But it was, it kind of hurt when he passed away. Like, wow, I missed something here that I should have seen, and that was the springboard on which got me down this path. And I'm glad. Wow. I'm glad I got pushed down the path.
And I think a lot of people that are listening, Doc, they would say that there are things in their life that when they've had somebody pass, somebody that's had to leave their lives, leave from them, and they go, man, I should have done that, or I could have helped this in this path. But you're right. I think we definitely feel that way at times, but God allows, in my opinion, those things to push you down a different route. And when you felt like you were led down that path, Doc, I just love these convos where you springboard into writing the book. You're already teaching. You said you didn't like to teach, but you started teaching.
Yeah.
What was when you started reading faces? Like I'm super impressed, and I'm not trying to take away from rabbit trailing off this, but I remember you told me at one time, and I was reading in the book, and you're right. Your daughter and you do a great job for the book. So everybody buy the book. I'm serious. But you were saying about the nose. And I remember things about the nose, and you were saying some of it has to do with the heart. You were saying some of the coloration, and I remember us talking about that. And my family line, my mom's had a stroke. My dad has had many stroke. Did not think about it because you're younger. You think you're a doc. You're taking care of yourself. You're taking your supplements.
Sure, absolutely.
But then, doc, kudos to you. I want everybody to listen to this. When I go and get ELT, electric lymph therapy, right? And I knew, doc, that like from my facial diagnosis, I had a little crease in my ear. Like you told me before, you said, now that could mean like some heart stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to that. And I just knew inherently that there was stuff going on, even though my blood works good. And then I go and get checked. And sure enough, the practitioner says, there's a lot of congestion around your heart spot. And I was like, doc, he knew it. The teachings you showed me, I was like, I knew it was there. And when I started to clean those things out, I could tell a ton of difference in my heart rate, a ton of difference in my blood pressure. So just wanted to mention that. Another thing, doc, when you started to unravel the face, you started digging deeper. What were some of the most the first, well, and that's a very general question, profound things that really hit you when you started really digging into the facial diagnosis?
As I was learning it, I watched myself from above, and I would ask, do you have any issues with your liver? Because they get these deep creases right here. And do you have any anger issues? So someone had eyebrows that are thin to the outside. It's a Hertog sign in Western medicine. It's low thyroid, hypothyroidism. But in traditional Chinese medicine can indicate a lack of sibling support. So, all these things. And I would say, do you have this? Do you have this? And then my wife one day pointed out to me, she says, you're no longer saying, do you have? You're saying you have. And that transition came so gradual, and I became so adept at being able to call it correctly that it was shocking to me. I didn't even realize I had made the change from do you have this to you have this. And it just, and we all have those patients that come to us that we know something's wrong, they know something's wrong, and yet everything is textbook midline normal. Now, the medical answer to this female, let's give it a gender, this female patient, oh, honey, you're lacking 20 milligrams of Prozac. Is that an answer? No, you don't care about the fact you feel like crap? I don't think that's a good therapeutic objective, And we've had those patients that we're kind of last resort doctors, because they come to us woo-woo doctors that we were the quack and went through the ranks. But I remember a patient, she was diagnosed with anxiety, depression. She was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. She had irritable bowel, which is always kind of one of those diagnoses that I kind of laugh at. Doctor, what does that mean? What does that mean? It means your bowels are irritable. That clears it all up. I don't do that. This guy had insomnia, and she had these weird rashes that went all over the place, and nothing was wrong. Everything was textbook normal.
Nothing's wrong.
But from a facial diagnostic standpoint, it was profound. I saw all the indicators that explain why she's got anxiety, depression, and she really wasn't depressed. She had all this lung energy that was so off that when you have a deficient lung, the emotion of a deficient lung is despair. And even the dictionary puts despair and depression in the same category. It's not. Depression is, I'm depressed, this is the reason why. Despair enters the word hopelessness. And so many of my patients, there's a hopelessness. Now, if you take a 17-year-old girl that has been picked on by her female classmates. I had two daughters, so I don't think there's anything meaner than a 15, 16, 17-year-old girl. I'm not trying to be sexist there, but I've had two daughters, so I'm an authority. When they decide to pick on someone, this isn't depression, this is despair. And you put someone that age on a drug called Effexor, and you will develop suicidal ideations. That drug is not a good drug. They don't have depression. They have depressing things going on in their life, but this is despair. And oftentimes just making your patient aware of what's going on initiates the healing response. Sometimes you got to quick treat the patient so you can take credit because the body's already taken off and making that run. But she had all this despair stuff. We supported her along. She had these rashes that were fungal, and we
Mm-hmm.
took care of the yeast, which took care of the irritable bowel, which took care of the fibromyalgia, which caused a decrease in inflammation. And all of a sudden, the fibromyalgia was gone. She was very acidic. We gave her a homeopathic remedy that cost $9 at that time called Nat Foz, and all of her
Mm-hmm.
acidity symptoms went away, and she got totally well. And there was nothing wrong. And she was put on, the reason I mentioned the Prozac, she was put on 20 milligrams of Prozac.
Wow.
And she came to me, and, you got to fix what's broken,
That's right. That's right, Doc.
It's amazing. And, again, I love the word moment. There are words in the English language that describe time, minute, second, hour, millisecond, nanosecond. But the word that describes the smallest amount of time is moment. And when you have these moments in your life that change your life, I mean, these are black and white, night and day kind of changes. And I had this Polish guy named Kowalski just rode my tail. What's a smart kid like you doing working in a factory? You need to get a college education, get a good job. And I got a college through. This is my, so, he would just ride my tail, and I just would avoid this guy, but he just was unrelenting. Anyway, the machine he was running, I was on that machine as a what's called a back tender. It's a weird terms to have in paper making, but our machine quit working. And this isn't good because the only way you make money is you make paper. And if you can't make paper, you can't make money. So this is a important thing. There were 4 machines in the machine room, and ours didn't work. And they called in the maintenance crew, didn't work, couldn't get it fixed. So after 2 days, they call in this expert. And this guy walks in, looked like a Marine Corps drill instructor, crew cut, short guy, looked like a Coke machine. It was as wide as he was thick. And he says, "All right, what's going on?" And so they explain. He says, "Anybody got about 10-pound hammer?" And so one of the maintenance guys gives him this hammer. So he climbs up the stairs. Now, these things are 2 stories tall. He climbs up like 20 stairs. He gets to the top of his machine, walks to the middle of it, and he takes this hammer and goes, boom, hits the middle of the machine, and it starts to run. and it kept on running. And so he walks down. We're all sitting there with our mouth hanging open. And this guy, so Kowalski, as he's walking up those stairs, he said, "Todd, that guy's making more money walking those stairs than you're going to make in a month." And I went, that got my attention.
Wow.
But he comes down the stairs. He looks at me, throws the hammer. I was sitting on this picnic table. He winks at me. He says, "Got to know where to hit it, son." That moment taught me that I got to know where to hit it when it comes to getting people healthy.
Wow.
And I know where to hit it because I've put in my time. I've done this 4.5 decades. But knowing where to hit it, you've got to have some clues. And I found those clues were in facial diagnosis.
I love it, Doc, because when we think about the face, I think some individuals listening would think, well, the face would have some correlation to an organ. And when on the podcast, I try not to over expound on something because I don't want to overload everybody out there. But I thought it was really beautiful about some of the literature. You and I are reading books about Chinese medicine, and the cool thing is, and I hope this is not over explaining, but I like that the Chinese medicine always correlates with how we were formed in the womb. Like there's days of gestation.
100%.
Is that right? Like days of gestation, days where certain organs and muscles are literally formed on the same day. And that's why we have this organ muscle relationship.
Yeah.
And the face has these neurological connections, right, Doc? And some acupuncture meridian connections to certain organs. So as we develop and grow, then there's these connecting pieces to parts of our face. And I want to go through some of those with you because people are going to eat it up, Doc. But is that right?
Absolutely. And it's nothing more than a microsystem. And look, I got the quack label, because I did things and thought differently. And I get that. But, it's just, if you don't know how to read Russian, then you look at it and go, that doesn't mean anything. And then somebody teaches you how to read it. And all of a sudden you can read, all these books in Russian, and because you learn how to do it. So the same thing is true here. And it's really quite simple. We start with an egg and a sperm. And actually there's one egg, and there's typically 300 million sperm flying around. In each ejaculate, there's basically 300 million sperm, one egg.
Wow.
Now, at some point, there is one of these sperms figures out and it fertilizes that ovum.
Mm-hmm.
And almost immediately, there's a release of these zinc atoms. And what they've filmed it, and it looks like sparks.
Ooh.
And then you can go to Genesis, and God said, "Let there be light," and
Wow.
then life unfolded. And these zinc atoms create these sparks that are all about life. So that one fertilized ovum almost immediately turns to 2, and then to 4, and then to 8,
Mm-hmm.
and then to 16. And the 16-cell embryo is called a morolla, the zygote. It's called a morolla. That's a bucket head thing, by the way. we
Really?
we remember that kind of crap. But anyway, we start with one cell. Why is it so hard to then extrapolate that into hand reflexology, auriculotherapy, iridology, foot reflexology? Why is that such a difficult concept? We started with one cell. All information started in that one fertilized ovum. And it's an interesting, I had a very difficult patient one time. Matter of fact, to end it, the rest of the story, I never helped the guy. He had a neurological disorder. But one of my things that I do when I have a tough patient is I get up early in the morning, get my cup of tea and my dog. I go up to my roll top desk and I'll typically pray. I just ask for any kind of help that I can get. And then I will just go up to my books and I'll walk. You can see my books behind me here. I'll just walk up and I'll wait till some book tells me to touch it. And I will pull the book. I will put it on my arm. I'll carry it back to the desk. I'll close my eyes. I'll flip through it and I'll open it up at a certain page and I'll start reading. And I cannot tell you, as woo as that sounds, I cannot tell you the number of times I got the exact right answer just because I opened my head up to the spiritual potential of healing, which I think should be respected and not overlooked. But in this particular day, I read about a sperm and an egg and all this stuff I'm telling you about. But interestingly, as he goes through the phases and the cell and the 16 cell as a morolla, the next chapter starts in this whirlwind of activity. Now, the term whirlwind does not show up in medical textbooks. And this was the name of the book was Medical Embryology. It says in this world of activity, in this multiplication, this replication of these cells, he says the author says this black mass forms, and as the body continues its replication of cells and the development, this black mass separates, and there's tentacles that connect the top and the bottom. And through the cellular proliferation, eventually this top becomes the brain, the bottom becomes the heart with the tentacles that connect it. Now, you go to James Allen's famous book, As a Man Thinketh, which is from the Bible. It's not what it says. It says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So we don't think with our brain, we think with our brain and our heart. And that moment in my career, the message I got, and I never did help the guy, but I became a profoundly better doctor because I realized I needed to shift my brain into heart energy. And by doing both, I became a profoundly better, not only a better physician, I became a better person. And I hopefully a better husband and a better father. So I had a dream once that there were 2 words, and the dream was information versus affirmation. And as we get into our world of learning, we learn more and more what we already know a lot about. We gain more affirmation. We affirm what we believe. But to really learn, do we not have to just take a step back and look for information?
That's right.
Most of us live for affirmation. If you're conservative, you're going to watch Fox News. If you're a liberal, you're not going to watch Fox News. You're going to watch whatever. I don't watch any of it because that all sucks. But we've got to seek information. Now, as a buckethead, I've been forever curious, as you are. So it became easy for me. But I that's why my motivation was not the patients I helped, it was the ones I didn't help, because I sought information to make a difference there. And then when I hooked my brain and my heart energy together, oh my goodness, it became so cool.
Oh, I love it that there is that, like you're talking about, that emotional, spiritual component about linking and thinking in your heart, but there's also that physiological proof in the books you read about how the brain is connected to your heart.
Yeah.
And when you're inquisitive, I know many people out there will say, oh, I think many people will agree with it and say, yes, there are some, like the roadmaps. I love roadmaps. I always think, Doc, that when we think about us being an embryo and we're basically a bean, and that bean is unraveling. And I remember one physiology professor telling me, he goes, you just got to imagine a little kidney bean unraveling, spreading, and all of a sudden your head, this is what he told me. He goes, you're actually a butt head. And I went, what does that mean? And he goes, your butt was connected to your head at one point. And he says, when you spread, he goes, those ganglion, those nerves just stretch. He goes, so you have a lot of the same type of cells everywhere, like, because you're literally one mass, like one single ball. So it didn't make me think too hard going, oh, so I could have ear patterns and hand patterns because the cells were all combined at one point, and then we just sort of expanded. So
Sure.
With that, Doc, one of the things that people are going to say, okay, let's talk about facial diagnosis. And you see how profound it is, because this is your work. But I would like to go through a couple examples, because people are going to listen to it and go, oh my word, this is amazing. So I'll ask you a couple questions. Like, I want to say, okay, what about let's do an example of the forehead. I'm going to go through, if somebody had, I'm going to just say, can you describe like maybe some basic tenets of the forehead and what that would mean? Like, some people have a short brow. Some people have a long, a very tall brow. Some have a wide one. Some people have lines. I used to have think lines, and people used to go, man, you have a lot of, frown lines, and not as much anymore. But can you give us a description of what that would mean for somebody?
Yeah. So everything has dual meanings. Every part of the face, it represents something else. And what happens in life, we'll have events that oftentimes will be marked on our face. And it will leave a mark, whether it's a mole, indentation, whatever it might be. So the microsystem of the face, the forehead represents your intestines, small intestines. And we have our ascending colon, our transverse colon, our descending colon. So these lines, if they form, and we see lines going across the forehead and they dip, that person's got a prolapse of their transverse colon. I promise you, it's 100% accurate. What does that mean? It means they're pooping uphill and they don't have good elimination, and that tends to create a lot of toxicity. Now, the basic tenet is in face reading is more, less is less. So if you have a large forehead, what's behind the forehead? The brain. So you and I have very large foreheads. Mm-hmm. So we have high intellect. Now, the face shapes that we're bucket heads. These are gifts from our Creator. But it comes with a caveat. And the caveat is this: you must use that gift to help mankind. If you don't, that's not good. You will be punished on some level. That's too strong of a word, but it is very imperative that we use our gifts to make a difference. So our gift is we must use our intellect. Now, our intellect is wonderful. We can think of creative solutions to every problem we come across. However, we bucketheads can think of creative problems for every solution that we come up with because we tend to overthink. We like a pat on the back. So the face shapes, really, I got into that so I could speak to patients. I would talk to you differently. If I gave you fish oil that was higher in DHA instead of EPA, I would explain in depth, because you got to ask why. Because that's our nature. We have to know the why. We're the philosophers. We're why. Well, I'm giving you fish oil. I want you what this does is the DHA is more cognitively enhancing. EPA in fish oil is more cardioprotective, but I want your brain to work better because you love the process of thinking. You also love a pat on the back. So when I'm talking to you about fish oil, I'm literally patting that patient on the back. If I have my wife as a patient, she's a king face. So they're natural leaders, very strong jaw, natural leaders, good judges, see both sides of a fence. Rarely are they wrong. I hate saying that. She's in earshot of me here. But she don't want to talk about the weather. She don't want to talk about sports. Her energy, all king faces. Can you help me? How long does it take? What's going to cost? Let's go. I don't want to think about it. because I'm
Yeah.
going to make that decision right now. So as the forehead, because of the large forehead we have high intellect. Also, our hairline is way back here. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of people have a narrow hairline where their hairline will come in and touch the corners of their eyebrow.
Yeah.
Those people have been, with the narrow hairline, they have very strict upbringing. They were forced to conform to parental wishes. You'll see this in pastors' kids. They call themselves PKs. And every one of them virtually has this very, very intense structure growing up. You and I didn't have that. We were allowed to think, and thank God, because we were going to think anyway. So what we do is see the world very broadly. So all this stuff can be information that can help us understand. Now, I do a lot of face reading now. People will send their faces, and I don't know anything about them. It's kind of fun because I don't know anything about them. In a clinical setting, I'm going to have history in front of me. I'm going to do an exam. I'm going to look at labs. I'm going to have all this data, and then I will use the face to confirm what I'm seeing. But now my world is people, I have no idea who they are, and I just have to read the tea leaves. And most people think it's pretty woo-woo until they have it done. And all of a sudden they go, there's just no physical way you could know that about me. It's just a phenomenal thing. And again, it's like reading Russian. If you don't know how to read it, it's very difficult. And it looks like impossible until somebody teaches you how to do it. And that's what we do. And I will spend the rest of my life sharing this information with as many people that will listen. And thank you for having me here, because hopefully there's thousands of people listening that will become interested. And what will happen is you're going to speak into someone's life differently because you saw something. And we all do facial diagnosis, Doc. When you look at someone, you go, you okay today? Something bothering you? So what did you see that day you didn't see the time before? This book just puts legs to that, but it allows us to speak in a way that, matter of fact, let me read a quote. We have in the book, we have these we call them life lessons. When you read a book cover to cover and there's nothing else, it can be onerous, and we break ours up, we section it out, and then we put the things. But so sad story here. My first two children died. First one lived about 20 minutes, didn't breathe. Second one, I was at Palmer in chiropractic college, and was born, didn't breathe, was revived, but severe brain damage. He died about 5 months later. So I say that to point out the fact that what I'm about to read wouldn't have come on this earth. These words would not have entered this into this book, because Abby was my fifth child. Would I have had, I certainly would have had three, would have had four, possibly. I wouldn't have had five. So Abby wouldn't be on this earth had those first two babies lived. But these were the words that came out. I'm going to try to read this and not get choked up. So it's life lesson number 8. Facial diagnosis changes how we see people. We've been reading faces for a combined total of nearly 40 years, and we have studied hundreds of faces while writing this book, trying to find the perfect example of each face shape and feature. We can't even count the number of times we uttered, "What a wonderful face." And these are the words. Something fantastic about learning to read faces is that you stop looking at people more or less pretty. When you learn to read faces, every person becomes a beautiful, unique individual. To see strength is inspiring and motivating. Seeing weakness increases awareness and empathy and helps you to become more kind. Facial diagnosis doesn't just help you become a better doctor, it helps you become a better person. Those words would have never made it on the pages of any book. And I'm proud of my daughter for writing those words, because it makes you a better person when you can read faces. And don't we want to communicate with people? I mean, and if you know how to communicate better, look, if you're dancing the waltz and I come in and want to do the swing dance, we're not going to get along.
Yes.
But if I know you're doing the waltz without hearing the music, I can dance with you. And that's, I had phenomenal patient compliance simply because I knew how to talk to them. It almost sounds sinister when I say it that way, but I really had the ability to know how to speak to an individual based on what I saw on their face. And then they would create what I referred to as the faith circuit. What this is you as a physician have to have faith in what you do. And the only way you get and maintain that is you have to continue to learn. So Doc, you and I, that's easy because we live to learn. It's our mantra. We will never quit learning. However, once you do your due diligence, when that person walks into your office and you shake their hand, and that energy that you put into learning is going to be transferred into that patient, they're going to have faith in you. And once you complete that faith circuit, healing is exponentially improved. I know you'll say this. Your successes clinically are so greater than your abilities because they were in my world, and I know they're in your world. We had things happen to patients that I had to go to guidance physiology and try to understand how they got better, just because I had to know, obviously, as a bucket face. These amazing things happen, these seizures that end it, these conditions that have no answer. All of a sudden, they got well. And I had no idea how it happened. And that is a good trait. When you can end your career and say, yeah, I have no idea how that happened, that is a good statement to make, because that means you've tapped into an energy that is so powerful, that is just remarkable. And that faith circuit, I'm not trying to go biblical here, but Christ healed blindness a number of times in the Bible. And one time he took mud and spit and he put it over the guy's eyes and he saw. And then there was a particular guy who was blind, and Christ was coming through this particular town, and Christ looks at him and says, "By your faith, you are healed." He just spoke it right then and there. But what everybody misses is the verse starts, he threw off his cloak and ran toward Jesus. So the interesting thing here is blind people would wear a certain color so people will know they were blind in those times. So he had such faith that Christ was going to heal him that he threw off his cloak, and Christ saw that he threw off his cloak and said, "By your faith, you are healed." That faith circuit, we need to tap into that every day in every clinic, in every town in this nation, and every nation in this world.
Oh, Doc. Oh, I'm profound. Like literally, I'm thinking about that he had to wear that so people would know that he was blind. I never knew that. And I wrote that down. This is really going to be something I'm going to keep analyzing, because it truly is. I see what you're saying about the faith circuit. I think that whenever we look at somebody's face, you're right, that you becomes a better person. And I think whenever I've been into a situation where you see somebody's face and you feel kindness, you feel it, and you trust that, you go, that person is very kind, they're very warm, and you can see those avenues. And then some individuals where you look at an individual and they may have, let's make an example of eyes or eyebrows. And I don't know much like you do with facial diagnosis, but sometimes when you look at somebody, you could say, I think that person's probably angry, just the way their eye set or their eyebrows. And some people, without even knowing facial diagnosis, they probably subconsciously know that something is, they're angry. Yeah. And then after they hear something later about that person, they'll say, "Oh, I knew that guy was angry. I knew it because when I saw him, I just saw it in his face." And when you start to, in a way, trust your instincts and you start to have that, in your stomach, I think that, like you said, many people do facial diagnosis on a regular basis, and some people have been attuned to it. You've created to where you're so good at it that you can just tell right off the bat. And when you see those things, not only does it tell something about them, but you're saying, like you were just saying, it tells you about yourself. So that way you can actually be preemptive, right? You could find out maybe there's some health issues about yourself. Sure. What about, Doc, you're talking about blind and vision. I can tell, what about the eyes? They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. What does that tell you? Is there particular things that people out there could look at their eyes and see?
Yeah, it's interesting. So in my world, the eyes are part of what's known as the wood element in traditional Chinese medicine. And this whole thing comes from that wonderful 5-element theory. And we spend the first third of the book not talking about facial diagnosis. And I'm sure people just are losing their minds trying to get to the good stuff. But unless you understand the reasoning behind it, there is little value other than party tricks. And when you understand that there is a connection. So in 5-element acupuncture, we know that the eyes are governed by the wood element, which is liver gallbladder. The emotion of that is anger. Well, as it turns out, that's what you can read in all the books. But there's always an excess, a balance, and a deficiency. So with the word anger, that's an excess emotion. Men tend to have a lot of liver excess energy, and we tend to be very angry. The balanced emotion is to be assertive. That's anger, that's controlled. The deficiency is a lack of assertiveness. And this is more common in females. And again, I'm not trying to be sexist here. I've got 45 years of observing this thing. Now, here's the interesting thing. And you and I would go, why is that? So statistically, women lose their gallbladder 8-to-1 ratio to men. Why is that? There's got to be significance behind that. Are they a weaker sex? Do they have a weaker gallbladder? No, they internalize anger because they're not comfortable externalizing it. We externalize it as men and end up in prison. Women internalize it and they end up losing their gallbladder because internalized anger will damage the wood element. Now, you can't lose your liver, but you can lose your gallbladder. You can lose one, you can't lose both. So the body will sacrifice an organ in order to survive. And the sacrifice can be picked up visually. And so many times I would use what I see to help people heal. I'm trying to think of an example. I'll give you an example. So I'm lecturing. I invented a product called Shape Reclaimed. My wife gained some weight with menopause, kind of lost her mind. I hate, as a physician, we hate diets. And I built Shape on 2 premises. One, all diets fail because all diets fail. Number 2, it can't be just metabolic. It's got to be something different. So I went back, why do all diets fail? And with the research I did, I read a book back in the early 80s called How to Lower Your Fat Thermostat by Remington, Parent, and Fisher. There were some doctors from 2 MDs and a PhD psychology in Utah. And they were the first to bring to my attention the theory of the set point. This is what the brain thinks it should weigh. So all diets, you'll lose weight on any diet you go on. Until when? Until you stop. Then you gain it all back. And the point here is if the brain gets a message that it's starving, you can lose the weight, but as soon as you come off that, it's going to gain the weight back. And so a guy starts at 240, 3 months into it, he's doing Atkins and he's measuring his ketones and he's in large ketosis every day. And he gets down to 200 and he feels great. And then he eats a piece of bread and all hell breaks loose. And the brain says, feed me, Seymour. And what I noticed with this is the body would bring the weight back to the 240. But then it said, look, you starved me. I'm going to protect you. And I'm going to raise your set point. Now you're at 260. So when I realized the importance of the brain, it just became such a marvelous thing with facial diagnosis. But anyway, I was lecturing at an event. It was called a warrior event. People that do Shape call themselves warriors because they're in this battle. One of the things I say is, look, I'm not here to give you information about health, you personally. That's something I want you to talk to your own doctor. And I always talk about facial diagnosis because I can't separate shape reclaim from facial diagnosis because they're not separatable. But anyway, so I can get to the question and answer. And this gal in the audience pulls up her left sleeve and pulls her arm up and pulls her sleeve down. And there's this hideous rash. It's just weeping. It's just hideous. And she says, Dr. Todd, I have this rash on my left arm. And I'm looking at her and I'm going, okay. And she says, well, I've tried everything. And I was just here to see if I could get your opinion. I said, well, yeah, I'm not here. Again, that's something to talk to your doctor. Well, and she said, well, my doctor in Chicago sent me down here so you could possibly help me. So I'm looking at her and I've got her physically diagnosed with facial diagnosis. So the thing that's important to understand here, face is good, but there's other things. Skin is governed by the metal element in traditional Chinese medicine, which is the lung, large intestine. The left side of the body is the male side. The right is the female side. She also has a deep, deep line running from the corner of her eye onto her cheek, tremendously deeper on the left side, and she's got puffiness only under her left eye. So the line is an adrenal line, a lot of stress. The puffiness is unshed tears. It's on the left side. And I said, I get this check in my spirit, like, don't go here. And I said, no, we'll talk at the break. And she said, oh, I think everybody would be interested in what you have to say about this. And I still get this check, like, don't go there. And I said, all right, how long has this been going on? She said, well, 4 years. And I said, anything happened 4 years ago? And she said, no, not that I can think of. And I said, she said, I've tried everything. I've done salves, I've taken drugs, I've taken all this kind of stuff. And I said, you've been diagnosed with depression, have you not? And she said, I have. And I said, I don't think you're depressed. And she said, well, Dr. Todd, there you're wrong. And I said, I respect your comment, but I think the D word that describes you is despair. And I said, the skin problem is only on your left arm. It does not respond to anything. You have this adrenal line on this left side, stress with a male. You have puffiness on your left eye, unshed tears with a male. She loses it, starts crying profusely. And she said, my husband left me for his secretary.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
said, can I ask how long ago that was? And she said, 4 years ago. This is a long time there.
Oh.
Now, here, the point of that, this is a long run for a short jump. She said, well, what do I do? And I said to her, look, I don't mean to be trite or cruel, but I truly believe you've healed your body, because now your brain knows what's wrong. And you've seen this look, as I have, that look from a patient, I'm never coming back look. The look on their face, like, I'm not coming back to you. And she had that look, and that was the end of the story, sort of. So the rest of the story, I'm up in Chicago giving another talk to a Shape Warrior event, and my wife and my dog and I walked through. It was a church we were giving this talk at, and we walked through these double doors, and this lady comes just running towards me like a heat-seeking missile. And she goes, Dr. Todd, Dr. Todd. And I'm looking at it, I go, kind of familiar. And then she pulls her sleeve, and it was the lady that I saw in St. Louis that lives in Chicago, that her doctor in Chicago sent her down. And she says, look at my arm. And it all came back to me. I said, so tell me the story. She says, well, I was never going to talk to you. I was very angry at you. And I said, I could tell in your face. She says, within 3 weeks, my arm was 50% better. Within 6 weeks, it was totally gone. 4 years of a hideous, oozing, pus-filled, despair-induced arm, because it was the fact that her brain didn't know how to fix it. No drug on earth was going to fix it, but her brain knew how to fix it. And her arm got totally better simply by speaking into her life what was causing the problem. And I think that is the true value of facial diagnosis, opening the possibilities of healing to the patient in front of you. I still get chills telling that story, and I will probably get chills till the day I die telling that story.
Truly, Doc, I think that there is power when the brain is expressing, or your body is expressing the rash, and your body says, this is the expression of what is going on internally, and you recognizing it, right? Like you're actually becoming aware of it. You spoke into her life, got her to be aware of it, and she recognized what was going on. Then her brain could process it and then start to heal. Wow.
Remarkable. That's one of many stories I could.
Oh, I know there's so many. Like this is, to me, because we'll have some good, for everybody out there, we'll make sure, Doc, with all the clips, we'll put down links to your book and the books you mentioned. But because I'll have you on more. So people out there, when you're listening to this, we'll have Dr. Todd back on. We're going to talk about more organs. But I love it that you're talking about left side of the face, Doc, you're saying is the male side.
Yes.
And the right side is more female. And you were saying like one side's more expressive and the other side's more internal.
Yeah. So back to the eyes, which is where this whole thing started. So when we look at the eyes, our right eye is what we show to the world. It's our public persona. It's our mother's influence. The left eye is our truer inner private self, and it's our father's influence. When I lecture and I'll show the two sides of the face, most people can't even see the left side of the face because there's so much energetic power coming off that right side that you can't see who the person really is. Now, when you can look past that power of that right side and see what the left side, again, she had unshed tears, that puffiness only in her left eye. That's just her body wanting to shed these tears. That's where you can get this phenomenal information. So when we see something only on one side repeatedly in a facial diagnosis, there's a gender specificity to it. I cannot tell you the number of times I'll see puffiness in the upper eyelid in the left side on females. And that's internalized anger as a result of a male. The number of times I see a deep adrenal line only on the left side in a female, it's almost disturbing. It's uncomfortable because these conditions are being caused by men who are not respectful of what they should be respecting.
Wow. So if we see, Doc, females, even a male, they had something that was more pronounced on the left side, that's the more deep internal, that side's more associated with like a male figure in that person's life.
Yep.
Right side would be like the female.
Yep.
And that's when you did like my facial diagnosis, you were saying that I had really very sharp intention on the right side, would be like more my mom's side. What about the ears though too? Because you're like the ears, what organ are they associated with? I remember on one person at the class, you told them truly that there was like uneven ears. And then you had another example where the ears were kind of stuck out and some said close to their head. Is there like a correlation of which organ to the ears?
Yeah. So the ears represent kidneys, or if you want to go to the TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, the water element, which is kidney, bladder, sex organs, and hormones. And then sitting on top of your kidneys, there's some glands called the adrenal glands. And people say, well, that's so hokey. If you have an ADD kid who's having a bad day, check the color of their ears. They're going to be bright red. There's too much heat in their kidneys because the adrenals, everybody thinks the adrenals do two things. They produce cortisone, which is your anti-inflammatory, and they produce cortisol, which is your help you cope with stress. But the other function of the kidney, the adrenals, is to distribute water. Does it through a hormone called aldosterone. I'm not going to get into the details on that, but what happens is these ADD kids, there's too much heat in their kidneys, and that's when they will be very reactive. And you can see the beet red and know that they're going to explode because there's too much heat. And then when the heat's in the kidneys, it's got to disperse. It's going to disperse it in the brain. Then the brain gets inflamed or an inflammatory type reaction, and they have ADD, ADHD kind of symptomatology. But the ears correspond to the kidneys. But the Chinese don't have a word for genetics. They call it ancestral energy. And it comes through our kidney meridian. It's called kidney Jing Well, if you're into that kind of dialogue. But so much is told on our ears, and it goes from 1 to 14, 1 to 7 on this side, and 8 to 14 on the other side. And it switches. Men are different than women. That's why we know the 1 to 8 on this side is male, and 8 to 14 is female. And so the same pattern. So I don't know how the Chinese ever figured this out, but they're kind of cool. They were the masters of observation, is my feeling. But it's pretty cool. So they do deal with kidney. So the more is more, less is less. When I lecture, I always will bring somebody up with real small ears, and I have these huge ears. And ears are about fear is the emotion of the kidney. So I would say now, looking at our ears, and ears, more is more, less is less. So if you have large ears, you're more comfortable taking risk. If you have small ears, you're less comfortable taking risk. Looking at the two of our ears, and I got this little tiny ear over here. Which one of us had 5 mortgages at one time?
Yeah.
And the gal with the tiny ears just about falls on the floor because she can't even wrap her brain around having 5 mortgages. And I go, it's just money, it's just whatever. So, it has to do with risk taking. If your lobes, if they're attached to the side of your head, you're very attached to family. If they're small, you're more present time conscious. If they're large and hanging down like mine, I'm always thinking about the future. I'm always about what's next. And you and I, for us, destinations suck. Now what? We're all about the journey, and it's so fun getting there. Once we're there, like, I'm bored. What do we do next? What's next? So, so our ears, if they're forward facing, we hear everything but don't listen. And look at how many kids diagnosed ADD have these forward facing ears. They also like to
Mm.
hear their own voice. So that's important to know that they like to be heard and they like to hear themselves. So they'll talk louder because they like to hear their own voice. So these things can be
Mm.
annoying to us as parents. But when I treated ADD, I treated parents just as much as I treated the kids, because the parent needed to know that this kid's ADD, my ADD and your ADD, we were the philosophers. Well, Mom, why? We were the questioners. Well, but Mom, why? But why?
Mhm.
It always ended up because
Yeah.
I said so. So if you got it, that's because we're very much in a water element ADD.
Mm.
Again, we're the philosophers, the questioners. If you're a wood element, they're going to push the boundaries. You gotta set the fences and let the kid walk to those fences. If that wood element ADD kid with the red ears that are forward facing, if you grab him and say, you stop what you're doing, you're going to get hit in the eye with his head, because you cannot fence them in. You've got to give them their place to explore. They're the pioneers.
Yeah.
So I would have to explain to the parent, don't try to rein that kid in forcefully, because you're going to get hurt. And these kids like to argue. It raises their dopamine when they argue. And that's why they take these medications like Strattera and Ritalin, because they raise dopamine. And it's the chemical of more in the brain. So men are governed by dopamine. That's why men have so much higher, 38-1 male to female with
Wow.
ADD. Because our dopamine, we're controlled by dopamine. Women are controlled by serotonin. That's a whole nother lecture. I do a whole lecture on the difference between men and women. That's absolutely hilarious. We'll save that for another time. But it's important to take all this data and then apply it to the patient's symptoms and opt for a treatment program that makes sense, instead of think of it as something as innocuous as hypertension in a medical office.
Mhm.
You go in and they take your blood pressure and it's 170 over 110. Oh my goodness. The doctor, this is bad. We can't have this. Let me think. Should I give you a beta blocker or should I give you a diuretic? I think I'll give you both. Should not. The first question be, why is that blood pressure high? Is it a pump problem and needing a beta blocker? Or is it a fluid level problem, a kidney problem, needing a diuretic? But give them both, and then they have a side effect. You can't understand why. Think and link, man. The name and blame energy needs to leave medicine. We name it and we blame it. Well, you got to think and link. And facial diagnosis forces you into think and link. You used the term just a bit ago about thinking and linking. And it's such a key component. Mark Hyman, I stole that from Mark Hyman. I researched that from Mark Hyman.
It's researched enough.
Yeah.
No, it's truly the think and link. I love it.
I think I'll make it mine. So to think and link is the answer in medicine. It's the missing link.
I love this, Doc. And one of the things, what about, let's see, what about, I'm looking here. One of the cool things was I loved, we're talking about the ears, we're talking about, the eyes. And one of the things, and we're going to have more confos with you, but I want to talk about the mouth. Like one of the things with the mouth is like, I know you have stories, Doc, and I'm just so thankful for everybody listening that there have been times when I have been stumped with a patient, Doc, and I did not, I didn't know what to do. And so I always tell people think I'm on Instagram or something. I think I have all the answers. Not in the least. What I am doing is I have all my books. I have things right beside me. I literally take my books and put it on the table beside the patient. I'm reading, and I'm, you have to be humble enough to just say, okay, I don't know this. And this patient come in, Doc, and she kept having certain rashes, of course, certain rashes in certain areas. And I was trying to make the correlation about location, meridians, but I thought I cleared everything out. Yeah. But one of the things that she kept coming in with, she kept having a big red ring around her mouth. Mm-hmm. And it would happen every year at the same time. Then she would have deep stomach pain. And when I read your book, you were talking about around the edges of the mouth. She had these cracks. You said, well, that's duodenal. That's like literally lower parts of the stomach. Yep. And they say around the mouth. Is that right, Doc? Like stomach. And when I researched and started doing deeper and we cleaned out, she did more research too and started cleaning out her stomach with certain probiotics and certain antiparasitics. Her mouth just cleared right up. Yeah. And it took really yes. So can you talk about the mouth and everything about the mouth? It's such a cool thing.
Well, we could spend, each part of there's 22 facial features in that we note in the book. We could spend, just an entire hour and a half, 2 hours on the mouth. And there's such great diagnostic value. And in its mouth, obviously the lips are there. So corners of the mouth, if they're always cracked, if they're always kind of rashes on the corner, it's a B12 deficiency. That's the medical literature. If there's long lines that come down from the corner of the mouth, it has two possible meanings. One, it can be a lack of hydrochloric acid, but it also can indicate loss. And just go to any nursing home and see these incredible lines that come down from the corner of the mouth in this 88-year-old. Well, what do we know about being 88? You've experienced a lot of losses, and they will mark in the face. Now, that line is much deeper on that guy that's sitting in a chair drooling and got pinpoint pupils, and he's got this incredible deep line only coming off the right side. He lost his wife. And he's in a state of parasympathetic dominance because his pupils are very narrow. His heart rate is so slow he can live forever because he doesn't need much. His energy of his stomach is enhanced, and he eats very little and gets a lot of value out of it, because that's what happens in a state of parasympathetic dominance. And he's sitting there drooling. Well, what happens when your parasympathetic nervous system is ruling? You'll have increased salivation. So all these things are very important. And he needs calcium because calcium will help that. Now, if you're sympathetic dominant, your pupils are huge, your mouth is dry, your heart rate skips beats, you're having panic attacks, and you have all this digestive problems. That's a magnesium-potassium issue. Magnesium downregulates the sympathetics, potassium upregulates your parasympathetics. So just all those things are found in the face and asking a few questions. And all of a sudden you have answers to those questions that nobody else has got an answer for. And that means you're going to get a ton of referrals, and you're going to be able to help mankind at a level that few people ever will. And I so honor, that's where let's talk about these lines that come from the corner of your nose.
Yeah, what about those? Yeah, Doc.
Both of us have those. Mine are incredibly deep, because I'm 72 and you're not. So these are called falling lines, F-A-L-I-N-G. Falling means purpose and spiritual strength. You have found your purpose, Doc. You have great spiritual strength. You're living your purpose. I am on this earth doing what my Creator wants me to do. I'm the most blessed man. I have this unbelievable lady by my side that just makes all my dreams come true, because I have lots of dreams, because my brain just is off. And I need a tether. I don't need an anchor. I don't want to be drowned, but I need a tether because, that's such a great idea. Off I go. Oh, there's another idea. and so I need my king face wife to tether me and make all my dreams come true. So, but we have a depth of spiritual strength and awareness of our purpose that only comes from doing what we're supposed to be doing. It's interesting. These lines form when the intention is to help mankind. Sometimes the diagnostic indicator is what should be there and isn't. Vladimir Putin does not have falling lines. Here's a man that has wavy lips. In my book, if you look under lips, you have the straight line. You and I have straight lines with your lips. We're straight talkers. The wavy line is Vladimir Putin. So if a straight line is a straight talker, here's a guy with wavy lines doesn't tell the truth. So he's an iron face, a very square, very Winston Churchill kind of face, strong, stable, stubborn. He doesn't tell the truth, and he has no spiritual strength. His purpose is to help. The purpose is to help him. And when your purpose is only to line your pockets, you will not develop these falling lines.
These are right here, Doc. Falling lines right here, right there.
Right there. You have them deep. Mine are chiseled in.
Yep. Doc. And I mean, you're describing me like, and both of us the same. It's like, I wonder, so when we have these lines, when you say we think it's just money, or we want our purpose, in no way am I talking bad about any other career or any other avenue. I'm saying for me, personally as well, Doc, it's that having the purpose in life, if I wasn't doing this or doing what I think similar to help teach or something, I don't know what I'd be doing. I don't think I could live a life where I wasn't doing what I'm doing. And so I totally see what you're saying.
That's how you get these lines, because this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah.
I love this so
Vocation
much.
comes from the Latin vocare, which means purpose.
Wow, this is so good, Doc. This is the things that we got to do. We got to do another one because I'll text you and we're gonna set up another time because we got to go through some more things because I'm telling you, Doc, just like when you're teaching online, people are gonna write a whole bunch of messages. So I had to prepare my my producer. I'm like, okay, we're gonna get a lot of messages on this one. This is gonna be perfect. One thing I'm really grateful is that when we talk about the mouth, we're talking about the avenues of how people can see. We're going to go over like how people can get in touch, like with your book and how they can read more about what the face, even on, a different social media platform. But I wanted to say that I'm thankful because more than anything, when you told me at one time, especially about the lines in my face or lines up here, we were talking about that and you were saying, well, it's intestinal. And on the surface, I would think that everything was going well, from all the indicators I had. But I literally had these lines for a long time. And I would get soreness around my lips. Okay, this is profound for me. So, Doc, I got the soreness around the lips. I get these little lines. I think I'm doing well, doing my methylation, doing all my stuff, and not saying it doesn't work. Those things work really well. In 2017, I kept getting burning around the lips, and I would just think, well, it's probably, I was like, maybe some spleen, stomach stuff. But it would happen randomly, and I get hot lips. And people think it's funny, but I was like, I'm getting hot lips. And would you know, 2017, people have heard me say this, but this is what happened. 2017, I woke up and I had a ruptured ulcer.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much I'm so thankful. I can rave and rave, but I've had patients that can do like some virtuals with me that call me. And literally when I look at them in the face from your teachings, I'll look at their face. I already have a heads up of what's going on. Like literally now I've changed my way of doing things. I'm like, oh, they got this, 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 and this. And that shows the deep seated stuff, in my opinion. So Doc, thank you again. Thank you for giving me your time today. I so appreciate you. All right. So, guys, we're going to sign off, Doc and I'm going to keep chatting with him for just a second. But till the next time, remember, you can get a hold of him. If you have any other questions, we're going to put some notes in the captions. You're going to we'll have some links for the books. And if you guys love this kind of content, just like and subscribe and send it to somebody that seriously, that has some facial lines and things that you think that you notice. Send this to them. You check it out too. Till next time, from all of us here at Ain't Health Podcast, thank you, Dr. Todd. Really appreciate you.